And I think we're live. So, welcome everybody. Hello. Thanks for coming out. If you are here, of course. I'm just here answering your questions. So, whatever questions you might have, hit me up, and I'm happy to give my input on what those questions might be. So, as soon as I start getting questions, I will jump into them. I definitely need to pick up from some of the questions I missed in previous streams. Maybe at some point I'll be able to do that, but as of now, it's just these standard sort of live streams as is. And I'm trying out this time. I realize there's probably a number of people who aren't able to come at this time. Totally get that. But yeah, so ask away. Hey, Watson, how's it going? Welcome. What time is it there? And where are you from again? Remind me. Thanks for coming out. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you guys or not. This is something that I think is really, really cool. And it's called Parcel Js. So this right here is Parcel Js. And it's just an unbelievably easy way to build your JavaScript packages. I think I'm only going to be using this going forward. It's just so easy, so clean, so cool. It's really this simple. So you add it into your project either way, and then you run the command parcel index. There's a few other things that you could add to it, but it will build anything that's linked in an index file. So if it's Sass, if it's CSS, it's going to build all those things, compile them much faster and much cleaner, which I think is super, super cool. So have you guys used this before yet? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Here's a little, poll. Please answer this when you get time by just replying #G or #H. Thank you. Let's see here. What front end are we going to be using for Django Bootcamp? So the Django Bootcamp is really just focused on Django. I'm probably not going to be spending a whole lot of time building front ends in there because it's literally only 10 days worth of material, roughly about an hour each day, probably sometimes more, sometimes less. So it's really just focusing on Django. Depending on how that bootcamp does, like how many people watch, how the private session goes, I might continue to do things like that. So doing a front end bootcamp of some kind, doing a React bootcamp of some kind, and so on. Because there's something that I think is really cool about these live events is being able to talk to you guys directly. This is something I really never had before when I would record these series. And if you watch that first video, hopefully it feels a lot like my typical classes or typical tutorials. A big part of the reason is because I wasn't looking at the live stuff at all. I was just recording the way I pretty much normally do. I had a little audio issue, but the actual jumping into Django and doing all that stuff was pretty standard. So thanks for the question. Yeah, Mark. Furkan, is that how I pronounce your name? Yeah, so it's almost, what's that? That's 10:12 p.m. We don't use military time like this with a 24-hour clock in the US. But Turkey, nice. Watson is in Haiti. Cool. There's so many places I want to go in the world. Someday I'll be able to see all of these places that you guys live because there's like beautiful places everywhere in the world. It's amazing. I mean, there's also really not beautiful places everywhere in the world too, right? It happens literally everywhere, which is pretty interesting. I wonder if there's somewhere that's like absolutely beautiful, like everything about it, if it's absolutely beautiful, with nothing that's bad. I wonder if that's even possible if humans are there. You know what I mean? Maybe Antarctica. It's like absolutely beautiful, but incredibly dangerous for us, right? Hello, hey, how's it going? RS wins. What's up? Akshay, hey. Aidish in Nigeria. Cool. Hello. Is Django and React a perfect combination? Um, yeah, I think they can work really, really nicely together. So thanks for that. No, you haven't seen Parcel? Is that what you're asking me? I think that's probably what you're asking. Thanks for the question. Javan, hello? India? Wow, it's probably pretty late for you, huh? Maybe like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, something like that? Got a few people from India. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Here's a good question. Can we still follow your try 1.9 series, both beginner and advanced, even though it's older? Yes, as long as you stick with the version of Django that's there. Django has certainly evolved over the years, but Django is still Django. So a lot of the core essence that you'll get from Django 1.9 or even Django 1.8, you can apply to today. Now, I think making the leap from 1.9 and then installing 3.1, there's going to be a number of bugs that happen there. So the best way to learn about it is actually to go from 1.9 to 1.10, 1.10 to 1.11, and just go step by step and finding all the bugs that come up when it happens. And whatever that error is, just search it on Google. Somebody has solved that, even if it's a few years back. I promise you, upgrading is a really good learning process for yourself. Thanks for the question. Following me since I was at 5,000 subscribers. That is crazy. Thank you. I appreciate it. I do a lot more now than I did when I had 5,000, huh? It's weird to think, like, it feels like 5,000 was so long ago, but it really wasn't. I mean, you know, I've been on YouTube, I think 6 years, almost 7 years now, teaching courses like this, but I really didn't do much for the first few years. I mean, I definitely uploaded, I think, pretty good tutorials, but it was like maybe once every 3 or 4 months, even if that. So thanks for following along. I appreciate it. That's that's really cool. Okay, so I've got 2 questions related to freelancing. I'll address this. I actually talk about this a lot, so I probably need to make a video specifically on freelancing. So yeah, let's talk about this. Now, how do you actually get into freelancing? First and foremost, you should go where a lot of people go to hire freelancers, right? So you want to be where the most active hiring of freelancers are. So at the top of my head, I would say that's Fiverr, Freelancer, and Upwork. I'm actually not sure which one is going to be the most effective depending on your skill set, because I don't spend a whole lot of time trying to be a freelancer or trying to hire freelancers. But I do know that those 3 have been incredibly valuable for a lot of people that use them. So just build a profile there. And ideally, you're building out your own portfolio. So ideally, it's on GitHub, maybe even your own website with the things that you can do. And it starts with being super honest about what you can do and not misrepresenting yourself. Because the worst thing to do as a freelancer is to say, like, let's say, for instance, you only know Flask. And then you're like, oh, I could build something in Django. Now, if somebody has a turnaround time of like 2 weeks, that answer is probably no. So it's a lot better for you to just say, oh, I can only do it in Flask. That's what I'm really comfortable with right now. But if you need me to do it in Django, it's going to take me at least a month or 2, or maybe even longer, literally saying those words, to actually get up to date on Django for your particular project. Because, of course, you want to get as many projects as you possibly can, but you shouldn't accept jobs that you really cannot do if it's not very clearly explained to the person that's hiring you. And then just take things that are, pretty much say yes to everything, right? So take every kind of job that you can get as you build momentum, with the goal of constantly working in your skill set. And so you can get a lot better. So the things that you should be getting better at are, of course, the technical side, actually building code, but also the communication side with the person who's hiring you, like asking a bunch of questions, getting a bunch of clarifications, not always jumping to assumptions, right? So like, don't spend a day building something that is incorrect. So asking a bunch of questions up front will help that a lot. So yeah, I think that's like among a good way to start with freelancing. That's at least how I would go about doing it. Thanks for those questions, guys. What is asynchronous? Like, why do you use asynchronous code? So a lot of code is called synchronous code. It's actually blocking, so one thing happens after another. Asynchronous code kind of happens dual, like it switches back and forth. The best analogy I give all the time is like if you're playing 10 games of chess. Synchronous code, you'd play one game of chess after another. So game 1, game 2, game 3, and so on. Asynchronous code, you would switch between the games while you're playing them. So you'd essentially be playing all 10 games almost at once, not exactly at once, but almost at once, and you're switching back and forth. That's kind of like how I like to reason asynchronous and concurrent programming. Hopefully that answers your question. Sanjay, what's up? How's it going? Sumet. Oh, so it's only one. I suppose India probably has more than one time zone, I would imagine. You tell me. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd probably be a good idea to know that, but I don't. As far, hey, how's it going? Hello. Yeah, so we got 1 in the morning. There we go. Sri Lanka. Cool. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Can you suggest some ideas to implement in Django for a final year project? I'm assuming a final year in university, like your grand thesis of a project. To me, like an e-commerce application would be amazing. Maybe some sort of machine learning pipeline where you do ETL, so extract, transform, and load for preparing for machine learning. I think that would be also really useful, even if you just made it open source. I'm trying to think of other things that would be maybe on the harder side of things. Perhaps a social network is one of those things too. Yeah, I don't actually know very many examples of other people's final year projects, so it's kind of hard to give you recommendations. If you give me some examples, then maybe I can elaborate on those examples. And it's almost 1 a.m. in Sri Lanka. Nice. The Netherlands. Hey, how's it going? Welcome. So Theodore, is that how I pronounce your name? I've been to the Netherlands. I've been to specifically Amsterdam, and I think the Netherlands is beautiful. It's a beautiful country. Am I going to talk about advanced caching techniques? So there are third-party packages that make caching really easy to do. So if you're asking me if I'm going to elaborate the nuts and bolts of those, I haven't really been asked that a lot, so I haven't covered it. So a lot of things that I cover, it's a combination of what I'm super interested in and what I get asked a lot, right? So a good example of Python regular expressions, I just recently did that one. I'm really interested in using regular expressions for web scraping, but also my old series was a little out of date. So I created a new one. That didn't come from anybody, right? On the other hand, doing some automations at Instagram, I was getting that all the time. So that kind of overlapped with things that I was interested in. Maybe at some point, if we get a lot of people talking about advanced caching techniques, maybe I'll cover it. It is something I should be more interested in. I'm just more interested right now in machine learning stuff. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you. I mean, I'm always up for somebody sponsoring some content for that. Like if someone's like, hey, I would love to sponsor a series for pretty much any topic that I can actually cover, which I'd be very openly honest about. I'm all for those things. So hit me up, whether it's on my email or on Twitter. This should be open, so by all means, here we go. Hit me up on Twitter, and of course that's my YouTube, at any time. Thanks for the question. So I don't know Django. I know Python basics. Can I follow your Django course and learn it? So the Python basics you should know are how classes work, how objects work, how to do at least some math. You don't really need to know how to do complex math in Django, but some math is a good idea, at least for the concepts and how some of that works. Maybe string substitution, string formatting, views are function-based views or class-based views, so you'd want to know how to write functions as well as classes. I think those are the probably primary things you really need to know to do well in Django. It might be a good idea to learn a little bit of HTML and CSS, but you don't really have to master those things to do well in Django. You should just know generally how they work. So I do cover that from time to time in some of my Django projects and courses. So thanks for the question. You want a real-time application using Django 3 using the power of ASGI. So yeah, an asynchronous server gateway interface versus what's typically with Django, or what has been historically with Django, is a synchronous web server gateway interface, or WSGI. So real-time applications, one of the things I did cover, I think using Django 2, was Django Channels 2. So that actually does add in some asynchronous capabilities with WebSockets that make it as close to as real-time as you can have. True real-time is incredibly challenging, and it's definitely outside the context of some of the content I cover. Maybe at some point I will, but it definitely needs a lot of back-end things to be really solid to get true real-time. And even that, I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how to execute that, to be honest with you. But like real-time or close to real-time using WebSockets, that's something not that hard to do. So Django Channels 2 covers that pretty well. I also recently released a WebSockets course on my website, or a project on my website, that just covers WebSockets itself, not the part on Django. So if you need more WebSocket basics, check out that course. Hey, Nepal. I heard it's beautiful there. Everywhere. What's jQuery and JSON? Yeah, so JSON, if you're familiar with, well, let me just give an overview of what JSON is first. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So JS is JavaScript, O object in notation. So JSON is a format of data. Didn't see that one coming. Excuse me. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. I really tried to switch it, but it was just one of those things that happened immediately. Okay, so back to it. So JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, it's really just like a way to format data and pass it around, right? So formatting data, it's very similar to a Python dictionary where you have key value pairs and stuff like that. But it's a way to format data. That's really how you got to think about it. jQuery itself is a way to shortcut writing JavaScript. So it's a library that shortcuts writing JavaScript that helps you manipulate things on a website or web application. I don't love jQuery anymore. It's a little bit older. It is very mature, so it's definitely still stable and usable. It just doesn't handle state nearly as well as some of the more modern ones like React, Angular, and Vue. Thanks for the question. Love from can't speak right now. Sri Lanka. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh man, these live things. You don't usually hear me sneeze on live things, do you? But you know what? If Joe Rogan can do it, so can I. That is the barometer, you know. If you're not at Joe Rogan quality, why even do it? this of course begs to say that I'm at Joe Rogan quality, which I am certainly not, because I don't have anyone else here with me. It's just you, right? And I also don't have a editor flipping back and forth with these things. But this little tool here that I'm using, what I want it to be someday is an AI that is literally my broadcast assistant. So it like actually at some point will read these questions aloud. We all get to hear it. Sounds natural, maybe with different voices even. And then that way I can just react to the question that's being asked. And if I don't want to answer it, I'll just say skip or something. You know what I mean? Like that I think would be really, really cool. So maybe at some point in the future. Yes. Django sends an email twice sometimes. Any solution? Yeah, so what you could do is actually turn the emails you want to send in a queue in your database. You could probably use Redis for it too, but basically put it into a queue that has some sort of flag on whether or not it was sent. And so when you run the send mail function, right after that, you update your database on whether or not it was sent. That way it's not duplicating that same email. That's like, to me, a fairly painless solution to do. So yeah. And guys, there is absolutely no way I'm going to get to everyone's questions. I really try to, but there's really just no way. One of the fastest ways for me to answer your question right away is just doing one of those super chats. I mean, even if it's a rupee, like I don't even know if you could do that minimum, but even if it's $1, a US dollar, whatever it is, it helps support the channel. But also, I get to your question right away because there's just no way for me to get to these questions right away. Like I take a lot of time going through every single one, as you can probably imagine, and hopefully you appreciate. All right. Which is a better project to start in Django? This sounds like a comparison. Like, what's a good project to start with? I don't know, maybe making a blog, because a blog management system, even though if you don't actually use Django to run a blog, blogs in general are fairly clear as to what the roadmap should be in building it, right? Like as in what the features should be and all that. But it also teaches you how Django works. So like the CRUD related thing, that I think is a really good way to start learning Django. And then the challenges that come up in that will make you want to learn a little bit more. After you do a blog like that, then doing something like an e-commerce application, which I do a lot. The current one that I have is an older version of Django, but it's still very valid. And you would definitely learn a lot from it. So, thanks for watching. What's my view on Django forms versus HTML forms? Which one should I use? So Django forms are made for validation. So if you're using Django, you should use at least Django forms. You can also use the Django REST framework for JavaScript related forms, if you will, or JavaScript managed forms. So I would say always use Django forms. That doesn't mean that you can't write a pure HTML form, but on your view, on the backend side, on the Django side, you want something to clean your data. Django forms do that really, really well. I cover this somewhere. I actually don't remember exactly where it was, but step by step of how do you get data from just a standard HTML form, and then how to use a Django form from there. I definitely cover that somewhere. So maybe if somebody knows, they can let them know where it is. Thanks for the question. Been following you since 2015, I guess. Oh, nice. Your first year of college. I always recommend my channel for the best Django tutorials. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I've been improving, hopefully, over time, you know? I feel like that's an emoji that's just not being rendered. Thank you. One thing you regret as a developer. Oh yeah, okay. There's more than one thing. One of the things was the duration or how long it took me to take from once I actually could build something to actually building it for other people, right? So a lot of the early projects I did were just for myself. But I would have actually accelerated that a lot if I went and hired or went and worked or freelanced pretty much at almost any rate. But I wouldn't just take any rate because I'm like, oh, I know Django. I'm not going to do this for $15 an hour. But in retrospect, it would have accelerated my skills so much if I worked for, I mean, practically nothing, because then I'd be solving all of these challenges that are happening. And then once you solve those challenges, then you're at a new skill level and you could freelance or look around for more work as well. So I wish I did that earlier on when it came to while I was learning Django. And I've actually considered that a number of times now with other skills that I wanted to know, right? So machine learning is an obvious one. Like, what if I actually started freelancing doing machine learning so I can elevate my skills a lot? That is probably not something I'll end up doing at this point in my life and career, but it is something that I think is a valid option and something I've seriously considered. I think more realistically, what I would consider doing is hire somebody who knows the skills that I want and get those things faster. That is something that I haven't done as well as a developer. Like early on, let's say, for instance, I was working a job that was actually allowing me to get my skills going every day, all day. I would also take some money aside and hire a coach that knows those things really well and potentially elevate my skills that much faster. Because the big question is, I mean, if you don't have the money to afford somebody to help you, then yeah, you got to do it the hard way. But that becomes a lot easier if you get hired to do it anywhere, almost at any job rate, if you can figure out something you can afford, of course. But if you hire somebody to coach you, they're going to see things in your abilities that you don't see, right? They're going to see the holes that you're missing, so it can certainly elevate where you're going. You know, Michael Jordan didn't win all those championships by himself. Kobe Bryant didn't win all those championships by himself. LeBron James, same thing. Like all of these people that win these amazing championships, they have a team of people around them that are all working hard with all those things, but they also have a coach, and that coach is helping them improve their game. I'm talking about the best athletes in the world, like in history. They all had coaches. They all had somebody there to help them get a little bit better. So for me, I wish I did that sooner, and I probably should use coaches now myself, right? So there's a lot of things that I can push forward with, and I just mentioned a bunch of those. So I regret making those decisions, not doing it earlier. So take that what you will. Thanks for the question. So all these sites are full of Indians who will work for $100 US. No offense, I'm assuming is what you're saying to Indians. You guys are cool. I don't follow what you mean by that. So I think you're referring, David, I think you're referring to Upwork and Freelancer and Fiverr. Like if you're a freelancer trying to go there, you're competing against somebody who's gonna take significantly less than you could to live in the US. And I totally get that. But you have other advantages for US related work is you do work in the US. So maybe one of those sites isn't best for you to start freelancing. Another option would be to look at some of the job postings for full-time work, especially ones that have been there for a while that haven't been fulfilled yet. You go and actually see what it is that they do as a business. You make a rapid prototype, spend an hour or two on a rapid prototype, send it to them for free of charge, saying, hey, I noticed that you're hiring for this position. I thought maybe this is what you were trying to solve. Here's a early draft of what I think you could solve with. What do you think? Now, vast majority of time, you're not actually going to get a client from that, like 9 out of 10 times, maybe 99 out of 100. But every once in a while, you totally will. And it might actually turn into a job, but it also might turn into a freelance relationship. That's one thing. I guess another one would be teaching people how to do things. Like if I actually wanted to be a freelancer, I would imagine that my track record in teaching would make it a lot easier for me to land clients, even if it's just a consulting role and maybe a project manager and stuff like that. Like I have a lot more options now that I've been teaching, and I have a lot of content related to that, regardless of the follower count. So thanks for the comment, David. Willy Wonka. Hey. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Where are you in London again? I don't remember. I feel like you're probably not, especially because you gave me a euro and not a pound. So, but thanks for the super chat, Willy Wonka. And I'm pretty sure that's not your real name, but I see you all the time, and I do appreciate you coming out. Where do I want to start if I'm new to Django? So if you haven't done Python before, check out our 30 Days of Python series. You could probably even go up to day 15. And then the Django Bootcamp. It starts on Monday. The actual lessons, I mean, I have day 0 on there too that talks about all this as well. So you can look at that at my live stream from yesterday. The Django Bootcamp is a good place to go. But if you're really eager, I have a bunch of Try Django series. You can pretty much pick any version and start there. Just stick with the version that's in the video. That's what I always recommend. Thanks for the question. Vue.js or React.js first? Doesn't matter. It really doesn't. They both are amazing. It's probably not what you want to hear, though. I really like React.js. Let's just put it that way. So I've spent more time with React.js, so that's why I like it better. I'm used to function-based views. How can I transition from function-based views to class-based views in Django and in Django REST framework? Cool. So this is a good one. Class-based views just shortcut function-based views functionality, right? So if you're used to a function-based view, it's literally the get method that's in a class-based view. Typically, that's like how it works by default. So every class-based view has different HTTP methods: get, put, post, delete. All of those methods you can handle for on a base class-based view, and you just start to handle them. So start there, and then actually read the documentation, or one of my videos. It covers class-based views. Definitely on my website, it's like class-based views unleashed or something like that. It's just a matter of turning your function-based view into a class-based view little by little, because class-based views are meant to shortcut things. What you don't want to do, I think, is actually just jump into class-based views without understanding how the base view actually works with the different methods that relate to the different HTTP methods. Hopefully that answers your question. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. You're fine, bro? Cool. Benoid, I don't know what this is. Or Binod? Thank you. How to implement live streaming functionality on a website. That is not a trivial task at all. Not at all. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit of spam here. Let me just hide that real fast. One got in there. I don't know if that's a word that, is that like a cuss word, or is it, I don't know. Anyways, if you spam, then I am gonna remove you. So live web streaming is not trivial at all, and it's definitely not something I can cover here, but thanks for the question. Any tips on scaling Django? Well, there's a lot of things, like actually making more efficient database calls and using the Django debug toolbar can absolutely help the performance of your Django application. That might be the first thing you start with, just making more efficient database calls. Because if you start to scale up a lot and your database calls aren't efficient, then yeah, it's going to really impact the performance of your scaling. So that's probably what I'd start with. And the select rate related method that you can do on query sets, that is also a really cool tool and a really useful thing to do when you're starting to scale. And it's probably like a requirement. I think they've even talked about making that the default option, and then if you want to take it off, you can just take it off. I hope they actually do that. That would be nice. Is my first Tweet Me course still relevant today, like the Ajax approach? Yes, you absolutely can learn a lot from that first Tweet Me course. The two of them don't cover the same things exactly. The second one is all React.js. The first one, I believe, was jQuery. So I absolutely think is still 100% relevant. It's just a little bit older versions of software, but that's okay. I mean, we can use older versions of software still to learn. It's just when you start to go into production, you really start to, oh yeah, so I guess, sorry guys, I got distracted. There's some spam going on. But if you really start to go into production, that's when you're going to want to use the latest and greatest stuff. And Ajax is just asynchronous JavaScript requests. So any sort of asynchronous JavaScript request is technically Ajax. So React.js uses Ajax. It just doesn't necessarily call it that like it does in jQuery. So hopefully that helps answer the question. How to show uploaded images by a user. I can't remember exactly if I did this in that or not, but you just need to assign it or associate it to a user-owned model and then do a backend request for that specific model, ideally with a URL that's being served from like AWS S3 or Google Cloud Storages. I think that's like such an overview of an answer for that, but that's how it happens. Okay, nice question. I'm not sure what you're referring to, but it probably was a good question. Django or Node.js? This question, I can't wait to never have this question again. Maybe someday. And this is not a dig on you at all, Marcio. Marcio, is that how I pronounce your name? It's just like, it's such a common question now that I kind of feel like maybe there's a blog post out there that like compares these, or there's like some courses out there that are talking about them all the time. Node.js is a runtime and it is not directly compared to Django ever. Node.js and Python can be compared. Those are much closer comparisons because Node.js itself can run your backend, but it doesn't have a full-featured framework like Django is. Django is a full-featured framework. The closest thing possible is Express.js, and that runs on top of Node.js. And Express.js is actually a lot closer to Flask in Python than it is to Django. Express.js and SQLize are much like using Flask and SQL Alchemy. So that's the comparison that you'd be going for. Django has a bunch of things built into it out of the box, so it's not a fair comparison at all. Can you use the both in the same project? Absolutely. Software is something you can absolutely use the same across the board. It's just not necessarily going to be on the same server, right? You can have a bunch of microservices that Django is working with for Node.js run applications, or vice versa, right? So Django could be a microservice as well. Not quite sure exactly why you would make Django that full-featured app that it is as a microservice, but there are cases that it might happen. So thanks for the question, and hopefully someday I will have a video on my channel that I can say, hey, watch that video. That's going to actually clarify all of this stuff. Not just me talking about it, but actual code that proves it. Let's see here. How can we achieve dynamic form fields when a user adds custom fields? Yeah, so I think the easiest way to do this is to have JavaScript on the front end creating the form and also validating the form. And then on the back end, the only validation you're doing is a JSON field. So you essentially store all of that form data in a JSON field. That way it's that way the structure of the model itself that's storing the data doesn't have to be perfectly correlated to whatever the user is adding. I'm assuming something like that is what you kind of mean. Maybe not, but that would be an easy way to do it. Or what you could do is have set fields, a bunch of set fields, and then any custom fields could be in that JSON field itself. And this kind of leads into the next question of what's the best database to use with Django. Postgres is probably the best for what I just mentioned, and it's definitely something I use all the time. Although MySQL is certainly up there as well. Like, I haven't seen a whole lot of uses that Postgres can't do that MySQL can, and also like vice versa. I mean, to me, it's kind of up in the air which one's better, but I think a lot of Django versions or Django users really like using Postgres. So yeah, Javine and Rashid both said the same thing. Yes, thank you for that. Any recommendations on a super fast database for OLAP queries? OLAP queries. What is OLAP queries again? I'm going blank on the definition. Online analytic processing queries. Complex. That is a question I'm not sure of. I think you can actually write. I think you can use Postgres for this, but I actually don't know. That's a good one that I need to actually research myself. I definitely need to get better at the database side, that like knowing SQL like backwards and forwards. It's really useful for web applications for sure, but it's also really useful for data science and machine learning to really know SQL really well. And I'm guessing this is a person who does know SQL at least enough to ask this kind of question. It's really good. I just mentioned this, so rewind it a little bit. And please ask the same question only one time. One time, please. Yes. Django React plus machine learning would be awesome. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. Pipeline, he's somebody who comes on the live streams every once in a while. He has Pipeline's a YouTube channel, Pyplane. I think he already has some stuff like this. I'm not positive if it's React, but it's definitely Django and machine learning. But at some point, I definitely need to cover it myself. Thanks for the mention there. Okay. Are there any books available on how to learn commonly used features of web applications with Django? There probably is. I don't actually read that many Django books, but I do know that 2 Scoops of Django is a great book for Django developers. You probably want to know a little bit more of the nitty-gritty things about Django prior to reading that book. I haven't seen the newest version, but the older versions are still very relevant too, because there's just a lot of like really best practices in there. And with those best practices, I think that would also cover those commonly used features. So just know a little bit about Django before you do that. Can you do testing in Django? Absolutely. That's definitely something that I'm going to be doing in the Django Bootcamp, which starts next week. Is your middle name Django Master? No, it is not. It is Isaiah. That's hilarious. That's really nice of you. I do not consider myself a Django Master, which is maybe kind of funny to a lot of you. I do know it pretty well, but I learn things about Django all the time. And the true masters are the core developers, those guys that are constantly pushing what Django can do. Those are the true masters, I think. And I actually have a list that I recently shared. I'm pretty sure I shared it on my Twitter here. So check that list out. It has a bunch of those really influential Django figures in there. And I'm going to add some more, but that's funny. Thank you for the nice compliment. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm actually going to go to some of the newer ones because I've been on for a little bit longer than I intended. So yeah, let's go to maybe a few minutes ago. Okay, what is React? What is REST? React is a JavaScript library that allows you to build user interfaces with JavaScript. So you can actually render your own HTML elements and the CSS that's related to it potentially using React.js. Without knowing JavaScript, that probably doesn't mean a whole lot. But just keep thinking of it in terms of like just a really easy way to make a user interface. That to me is like the baseline level there. REST usually refers to REST APIs or RESTful APIs, which is a methodology of creating a way for something like React to interact with the backends where your database actually lives. So the REST API itself is sort of like a middleman between something like React or your front end, like the web page itself, and the backend. A REST API is that middleman. A lot of times it's managed by Django. Sometimes it's managed by Fast API or Flask or Express.js. I mean, there's a lot of ways on how you can build a REST API, but really it's just this middleman that handles all of the database transactions. Because at the end of the day, most web applications are just something on top of some sort of database, which is another reason to learn and master these database languages even more. Yeah. Cool. Can I make a tutorial like making Zoom with Django and React? Yeah, so doing live stream videos is not trivial. So actually creating a course for it, yeah, it's gonna be a little tricky. A little tricky. Probably too tricky for this channel, to be honest with you. Is there anything like anything WordPress like CMS built with Django or Python rather? Yeah, there are a number of content management systems. That's what CMS stands for WordPress, like WordPress with Python. So Django has a few. I don't know if they're as full featured as WordPress though. WordPress is incredibly mature. It's a really big business, and they are constantly making improvements, and so are a lot of other people. Whereas anything else that's trying to be a blogging platform like WordPress has that uphill battle, right? So if you were going to come to me and say, "Hey, I want to actually release a blog. What should I do?" Like just a blog. You're not talking about actually coding anything. You're just talking about releasing a blog. I'd say WordPress is a really good place to start, maybe, or maybe even medium.com. So you don't have to worry about any of the software that runs it. You just literally write a blog. But WordPress would probably be where I recommend it, even to Django developers, because do you really want to spend the time managing a blog when what you could be doing is just writing a lot more on that blog where the actual value is? Now, if you're learning and you want to get better at Django, then absolutely build your own CMS. Or if you want to get better at Flask or Fast API or any of those, right? Express.js or Ruby on Rails, whatever it is, building a blog is great for that, for the learning part. But actually, when you go into production, I don't think it's always the best. Now, of course, my Coding for Entrepreneurs blog is all driven through Django because I use Django for all sorts of things, and it would be, I think, a little bit of a disservice to many of you if I wasn't actually using Django on a regular basis. So yeah, thanks for the question. I need to refresh my authentication tokens here for my chat. So give me a moment. And hopefully I didn't miss any of the super chats. Nope, I don't think I did. So 2020, huh? This has been quite a year. Good and bad, right? It's just really, really strange time, I'd say. Let's see here. Okay, cool. Re-authenticate it. Okay. Now, any ideas how to send files in a Django chat? I've been loading up to AWS 3 to upload the files and sending the link for channels to support file sending, which is better. So you can actually turn it into a base 64 encoded string and send that to Django channels. That would be one way to do images themselves. Actually uploading it to AWS is a viable option as well, because you can do that asynchronously using React.js. And you just need to you need to have it signed before it's uploaded. So you'd have an endpoint somewhere on your Django project to actually sign the file itself. Then you upload that file, and then with that you can associate it to any given chat message. So the UI itself would have to do a number of things that are going on there. But you could also do it as a basic 64 encoded string as well. I've seen both approaches work well. So thanks for the question. Super Chat and Super Sticker are not supported in our country. Oh, that's a bummer. So yeah, I wonder why. Where are you from? Sorry if you already mentioned. Maybe there's another sort of solution there for these chats. Is PayPal supported? Yeah, but thank you for mentioning that. Okay, how to build Django with two-factor authentication sent by email. What email service should I use? So two-factor authentication with email, what are you using? Like, isn't your email your single-factor authentication? Your two-factor authentication would probably be like a text message or Google Authenticator or something like that. So those are the things that I would recommend. Email service, I think SendGrid, now owned by Twilio, which also does text messages. I think SendGrid is probably one of the best options. AWS, is it SES, Simple Email Service, is also another really good one. So those are my recommendations. Mailgun, yeah, somebody mentioned Mailgun. That's a good call as well. What's going on here? Hang on. What's up? Okay, that was weird. Thanks for watching the Tweet Me video. Appreciate it. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you. I'm just scrolling for days here. Okay. David Rosen, where are you? Please let me know. Single purchase project support for CFE. Enrolling on seems expensive. Working on one project at a time. Any benefits like private live streams or mentoring? Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. Yeah, so the enrollment is meant to make it less expensive overall, right? So if you're actually doing the projects regularly, I would say that overall enrolling for a year is going to make that a lot easier. And to me, it's an investment in the skills that you're working on for sure. Because if you're talking about private live streams or mentoring, I'm actually going to be doing the public live streams next week that are for Django. So it's going to be public for 2 weeks straight, so 10 days total. And after that, I'm going to be doing private live streams, and it's going to be limited to 20 people and probably $200 US, because that one-to-one interaction is something that takes a lot of time, as you might imagine. So I think that private live streams are going to be really good. I have no idea if I'll ever do it again. And I have no idea if I'll ever do it again at that rate. It really is all going to depend on how the whole bootcamp streaming thing goes, because I haven't done it before. Because actually reviewing other people's code and giving really valuable insights into that code, it just takes a lot of time. So we'll see. But yeah, I would say starting with enrolling and just really committing yourself to as much of that as possible. I try not to sell it too much, in the sense that, like, I don't think you should invest that time if you're really not ready to do it. But if you are ready, then it's well worth it. I promise you that, because I have so much stuff on there that will elevate your skills more so than what's on YouTube. Although if you're not ready to invest in it, there's a ton of free stuff on YouTube that will hopefully solidify in your mind that you're ready to move to the next step. Thanks for the question. I'm very good experience with Django, and I'm having a hard time implementing microservice architecture in Django. Yeah, for this, you're probably going to want to use something like Kubernetes to actually do the microservice architecture, not necessarily in Django itself. So Kubernetes it's made to handle microservices, right? That's what it's made to do. and then your Django project would just live in a Docker container, and then Kubernetes would manage your Django Docker container, and then you would manage a bunch of other Docker containers for all of the other microservices, and Django does that really well. Dave, no coffee today. That's okay, Dave. I appreciate you coming out and asking a question. You gave me coffee like a few hours ago, it feels like. So thank you so much. Do you have any recommendations to ensure a security of a web app, a checklist, security review type stuff? I probably definitely need to make a checklist for this, including a deployment checklist. That is a good question. So there's several big things that I can just mention really quickly. Well, Django also has, I believe Django on djangoproject.com has a bunch of recommendations as well. So definitely refer to that too. One of the things is moving all of your keys, any key like the secret key or a private security key, any of those things, move those out and put them into your environment variables. So there's a lot of different ways on how to manage this. Heroku makes that really easy. Google Cloud Run makes that really easy. AWS. So a number of services that make that easy to add those keys to your environment variables, because then you can change them at any time at will without breaking your entire backend. But it also makes your backend a lot more secure, so you don't accidentally deploy it to like GitHub or something like that with all those keys exposed. Luckily, GitHub's pretty good about letting you know about that, but you know, it falls through the cracks every once in a while. So that's one thing. That's a pretty low-hanging fruit of security. The next thing is always using TLS or SSL, also known as HTTPS, the lock in the corner, and actually setting up all of the necessary SSL-related things inside of Django as well. So secure sessions, cookies that have the same domain as what you have. I'm probably forgetting a few things, but good question, Dave. Thank you for that. I think it's a good idea to have a checklist in general. That's really cool. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate the super chat. You were unsure if super sticker is supported. Is this what that is? I'm still like getting used to these things. I thought super chats, is that the same thing as super sticker, or if it's different? I don't know. I just know that this is a super chat. So thanks, Josh. Hopefully I answered your question earlier. Okay, let's see. And of course, if you guys have questions, just hit me up. I mean, I try to answer as many questions as I possibly can. Sometimes I don't get to all of them, and these live Q&As are a good example of that outside of the live Q&As. But I do think that spending the time answering questions helps me understand what the challenges many of you are facing. And I have heard a lot, hey, you should sell individual courses instead of a membership. My biggest hang up about that is enrolling means that we are both making an agreement that these things will improve, right? So your agreement is like, oh, I'm gonna learn from the things that are current. My agreement is, hey, I'm gonna continuously improve this stuff. As long as you're a member, you will absolutely get benefit of that, but you can also come and go as you please. So that to me has been enrollment so much, because what I've seen a lot in content marketing is just trying to convince people to buy a course, right? So what I've learned in these last 7-8 years of actually selling courses and doing all that is a lot of people love to buy courses, not do them. They love to buy them. And that's great. To me, I would rather get you in this mindset of, I really need to learn this stuff and I'm going to stick with it. To me, that's what the enrollment's all about, is you're committing yourself to sticking with it until you truly master it. Whereas buying a book or a course, you can buy it and forget about it and never see it again. That doesn't mean I'm never going to do those things, but I do like taking that stand with the enrollment. But I realize it's not practical for everybody, so I do definitely take that in consideration. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how courses evolve. especially with what COVID's done and all that, because it's really changed a lot of things, and hopefully for school, for the better. I actually don't know how much of these live streams I would be doing if it weren't for COVID, honestly. Like, this has really helped me reevaluate how I need to do things as well. I would imagine a lot of you are in that same boat. So anyways, thank you so much, guys. Let's see here. Next one. Make a Slack clone. Let's see here. Make a Slack clone with Django, React, and Firestore. And I'm assuming you probably also want Electron on there as well. Yeah, if you're using Django, you don't necessarily need to use Firestore, but or you could just use another backend if you're using Firestore. I think something like Fast API or Flask, something that doesn't need to be as full featured as Django. But thanks for the comment. I think this is a good suggestion for sure. Oh man, and like 10 minutes ago I said I was going to be done soon. Okay guys, so I'm going to answer the last few questions. I'm going to take this little on deck thing off, the comments off, and I'm just going to go ahead and try and answer some of these questions down here. So what are microservices, DevOps, and serverless? So DevOps is everything behind the application layer of any given web application. So all the servers, how those servers run, how often they run. I mean, the application layer does fit into the DevOps equation as well. So how to actually push code into production, how to do it securely, how to manage your databases and stuff like that too. DevOps is a really big topic altogether. So I would check out Network Chuck. I think he talks about, this is another YouTube channel. He talks about all sorts of things related to DevOps, and I think he's great. So check that stuff out. Microservices, well, typically applications are called monoliths, or traditionally I should say, where it's a really big application and all of the code is in that application to do everything. So authentication, emailing, like anything you can think an application might need, it would be in one service, one big old application, right? So what microservices do is break that up into smaller chunks. A good example of this would be email, exactly, right? So right now, you could figure out how to actually write email directly from Django and not use a third-party service at all. So not log into a third-party service, but actually manage the entire email service yourself. You could totally do that. I don't know if it would work as far as spam and like some other things that are out there, but technically speaking, you totally could do that. But instead what happened is we decided to chunk that off as a separate service. And if you think of that in terms of all of an application, you start to break it out, and now you start to have a bunch of microservices that build up one big service. So you can do that with a lot of services like Kubernetes that actually help manage all of these microservices themselves. Another thing that's nice about breaking things into microservices is that if the microservice or that single individual service goes down, it won't affect the rest of the application. Because a big monolith, a non-microservice one, if a piece of it goes down, that might bring the entire application down. And it probably will bring the entire application down, where when microservices, when those things go down, the entire application can still run. It's just maybe that one piece doesn't run correctly or at all, and then it can be picked up later. So that's like one of the big things about microservices that is incredibly important. The last one, serverless. So serverless takes the idea of microservices and DevOps to another level, where you're just focusing on literally the application layer, as in something like Django. All you're doing is deploying that to somebody else's architecture that manages all of the things that need to be there for Django to run, or Flask or Node.js or any other runtime. And then what serverless means also is that if it's not being used, if that application is not used at all, then everything to run that application scale down to 0. But they can also scale up to almost infinity. So Google Cloud Run is a really good example of serverless in the modern age, right? So if you want to learn more about that, I definitely cover it on my website. So Google Cloud Run is really, really great for serverless. But there's still actually a server there. It's just you don't manage anything related to that server. You only manage the code that runs on that server. That certainly is confusing if you don't understand all the things that are behind the code itself. But I think it's intuitive to understand that Django doesn't just run on its own. There's a bunch of things that allow it to run, and doing all the networking on wherever the server is physically. It just takes a lot of work to do all that stuff. So definitely strayed a lot with that question, or I gave a lot of context. Hopefully it answered your question. Question, can we use Java instead? Yeah, sure. I don't know if I'll be able to help you answer it. June, go ahead and ask your question again now. I'll see if I can get to it. Thanks for coming out, you guys. Mukesh, Django or Flask? It depends on the project. It almost always depends on the project. Here's a good question. If you were to start writing Instagram today, would you start with Django? Yes, I would, because I know for a fact that Django has the need for authentication, and potentially, I don't remember if Instagram started with Facebook authentication, but you might also want to have Facebook authentication in there. So Django has a package called Django AllAuth that makes that incredibly easy. You could do it in Flask probably, but I wouldn't only have Django. I would probably have microservices and also use Kubernetes to run a lot of Django. In fact, I wouldn't do that right out of the gates though. I would actually deploy it on Google Cloud Run and just pay for what's being used, because you want it to be as inexpensive as possible. Cloud Run can help that happen, but then also manage the scale as you grow up, or you get some more, traction or hits to your website. So, yeah. For beginners, what do you recommend? It depends on what you're trying to do. Hopefully that answers your question as far as Django or Flask. But Flask is incredibly easy to start with if you know Python already. Django is more full-featured, so I think it's worth learning Django even if you want to use Flask, so you can see generally where you want a web application to go, because Django has a lot of those things already built in and forces you to learn a lot of the concepts behind web application development to actually build web apps. Okay. So yeah, Rashid, thank you for being here. Thank you. Are you in Australia? Because thanks, mate, sounds Australian. Perhaps not. Perhaps mate is becoming just more global in general. Best book or course for data structures and algorithms in Python. I don't have a good recommendation for you there, but there is a GitHub repository called The Algorithms, and there's one for Python, and it has all kinds of algorithms in there that I think are really cool. And those algorithms themselves, I think, would hopefully bring up questions on what you need to do. You know what I mean? Thanks for asking. Oh, you're Indian. Okay, is mate common in India? Let me know. Can YouTube only prepare you for the market? As in, can you learn enough in YouTube to get a job? Yeah, absolutely. You 100% could. I mean, YouTube alone, maybe not. You probably would still have to read other articles or the documentation for any given code. But YouTube's by far the best university in the world. There's like nothing else that's close. This is for anything and everything. And if you spend the time and effort and energy, you can totally make it happen. To me, when you want to learn specific things, that's where YouTube can fall apart a little bit, right? And there's people like me who have a lot of stuff on YouTube, but the things that take us a lot more time, effort, and energy, we put on our own websites and sell as courses, right? Because it just takes so much more time. And those courses help like circumvent a lot of the challenges you would have when you're trying to do it on your own or trying to piece it together on your own. But you totally can piece things together on your own. You absolutely can. So yeah. What will the $200 private course specifically go over? It's a good question. So the live stream will be 10 days. It's going to continue from that live stream, but really you're going to bring your projects, whatever challenges you have, and as a group, we are going to help solve them with each other. So that's going to be ironed out a lot more once we actually all get together exactly what the challenges are that you are facing. So in some cases, I will actually take the challenge that you're having, stop whatever we're doing, like the live stream or whatever it ends up being. I will solve that challenge as best I can and then come back and actually show you how it's done, whether it's on a live stream or it's just in a video that I send directly to you or to that group. It's going to be sort of combination of that to really help solve the problems that that group specifically is having. Thanks for the question. And I should be putting these questions back on the screen, huh? Because here I am again, going back with it. Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions, but this one I wanted to address. You're watching The Boys, so now mate is just on the tongue. Oh yeah, that's funny. The Boys is great, isn't it? It's so much fun. Daddy's home. That, like, when Carl Urban said that, I'm like, geez, this is like such a perfect role for that guy. Yeah, Carl Urban. Yeah. Okay, guys. Thanks for all the questions. I've now definitely far exceeded how long I want to be on here. But these live chats are a lot of fun, and I'm probably going to continue doing them. I think for a lot of you, this is maybe a good time to actually hold live streams. I don't know. I've been experimenting a lot as far as the actual time itself. So yeah. Last one. Can I give you a movie suggestion? What's a really good one? I mean, I really like Interstellar. That's one of my favorites. So yeah. Arjun, I tried to have you ask it again. I didn't see it. What'd you ask? Are you asking the same question over and over? Oh, here we go. I found it. No need to ask it again. I told you I had to answer it, and this is the last question. Are we still using Django and Flask for server-side rendering, or only API and React Angular Vue for UI? Yeah, so is that all I'm covering? Is that going to be in a live stream? Is that, if that's what you're asking, all I'm covering in the live bootcamp is Django. If there is minor JavaScript things, I might actually end up doing that, depending on how the things go, but it's pretty much only Django. So if that's what you're asking, hopefully that's your answer. But you can use server-side rendering for React. I believe Angular has support for it, and Vue. I believe they all have support for server-side rendering for those applications. That's just not something I'm covering at this point. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming out, and I will see you next time. Thanks for the super chats and all of the really good questions. This has been a lot of fun.